Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, where we celebrate individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Ashley J. Peters is our guest on the Outdoor Adventure Series today. Ashley is the communication manager at the Institute on the Environment at the University of Minnesota. She's an outdoor writer and conservationist. She's on the board of many organizations that are conservation focused. And I know Ashley because she's also a member of the Outdoor Writers Association of America, and she is also on the board as well. Now, Ashley has spent time at many organizations that you probably don't recognize. Americorp, well, we have the state of Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the National Audubon Society. She's been with Audubon Minnesota, and actually an organization that I had never heard of before, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it, the Ruffled Grouse Society. So, Ashley, it's a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Howard. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. You know, one thing that came across as I was preparing the notes and for the episode and what you shared with me, you've been in the outdoor space, conservation, stewardship, access, seems like your entire life.
It would seem that way based on my resume. Yeah, I did not grow up hunting or fishing or really hiking a whole lot as a kid. So this is definitely something that I took on late in college and early in my career as a passion. So happy to talk more about that. But yeah, it's definitely been the focus of my career for sure.
Very good. Well, how did you get so interested? Because I mean, when you talk about in your early years, really didn't have that interest. And now when I look on your social sites, there's you walking in the woods with a hunting rifle and the camouflage gear or the orange yellow reflective gear. That tells me you're pretty active in the outdoor space. So what was this transition between being at home and doing things that are not outdoors focused to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, a big piece of it, honestly, was the Americorp term I did right out of college. Now, when we talk about the outdoors and accessibility and getting new people interested, I think it's important to point out that it's not a straight line. It's not a one-time event, that there are a series of things that happen that introduce you and get you comfortable with the outdoors. It didn't hurt that I worked in the fields as a teenager doing detasseling, so I got used to really hot conditions and learning how to exist in that kind of a state. I also ran track in college, which helped me understand how to run outside in cold conditions. We ran outside year-round. So there were pieces like that that laid a foundation for me, but really the thing that got me interested and really excited and wanted to invest my career and my time in conservation was this Americorp program I did right out of college. And so for 2 years, I camped and worked in the woods, first in Alaska for a year, and then the Boundary Waters for the better part of a year, 2008 and 2009, respectively.
Okay. Now, for our listeners, could you, in a couple of sentences, 30 seconds, whatever, what is Americorp? I've heard of it.
Yeah.
But for our listeners who haven't, what is it? Is it still around?
It is still around. It was a program that was started in the early 90s. And you can think of it as a domestic Peace Corps. So a lot of the same support for communities, looking at where volunteers are needed to help initiatives. In the case of the work I was doing, it was a lot of backlogged land management work for like the National Park Service, the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management. So it just depended on what kind of work really needed some additional support. And so we went in as volunteers and helped with that work. We also did volunteer projects in local communities related to that. So yeah, that was for a couple of years that I did that, and it's still available. You don't get paid a whole lot. You get a stipend, basically a living stipend while you're doing it. but you do get an education award at the end. And so that's part of the reason I did it, was to get 10 grand towards my student loans. And that really helps you when you're starting a career and you're having to juggle all of these expenses. Having that to help with student loans was a huge support for me.
I can imagine. And you actually were volunteering, or not, you were in the Americorp in some wonderful places, the Boundary Waters, it's beautiful. Alaska, well, nothing else needs to be said about Alaska except it's Alaska. Was there and I would say an aha moment, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but was there this kind of an event that really spoke to you, like, wow, I can't believe I get to do this? And I mean, plus you're doing wonderful work, you're meeting people, you're networking, you're outdoors, which is something that you've always enjoyed being. Any specific event kind of still hold that special memory for you?
Yeah, I would start by saying that when I was in college, I really wanted to be a full-time writer. But this was early 2000s. Blogs were coming onto the scene. We were seeing a lot of newspapers fold. It was a very tumultuous time, right? For like anybody who's doing communicating. And I knew that in order to be a communicator or a writer, I needed an area of expertise. So I could communicate about communicating, but I wanted something to be passionate about. In college, it was a lot of sports. It was thinking about what communities need. I was a first-gen college student, so thinking about access to college resources. But really, when I went to Alaska and I got to see firsthand what it meant to manage natural resources, what it meant to manage land, what it meant for a lot of these federal and state agencies to try to navigate the funding that they're provided and the mandates that they're provided against what is really needed on the landscape. I know we've heard a lot about forestry in the last few years in terms of what land management agencies need to do and how they need to do it versus the resources that they have available to do those things. And so I got to see that firsthand, and I got to be part of that challenge. And it was very clear that there was lots of work to be done. This was the kind of thing that I could sink my teeth into and continue to work on for the rest of my career. And there's a lot of job security there in terms of promoting the outdoors and talking about conservation. There will always be that need. So I'm never going to run out of things to talk about when it comes to this. And that was important, right? As somebody who thinks about conversations that need to happen and change that we want to see in the world, you have to have something that is going to take a bit of work, and it's going to take a lot of effort. And it was clear to me that that's where our natural resources were in a great state for what they are compared to a lot of other places in the world. But at the same time, there's always room for growth. There's always more that you can do related to habitat and wildlife conservation and getting folks into the outdoors.